because we're on the subject of, you talked about low fast flyers. We're talking about Iraq. Iraq had the MiG-25. We just referenced that. I read recently a piece about the SR-71 getting the F-15 community. This would have been in the 70s, early 80s, to practice intercepting it so they could figure out their I don't know who it was. I don't know who was going to benefit from it, because it sounded like a complete waste of time. Because the long and the short of it was that the Eagle never managed to get into a position to shoot a simulated missile at an SR-71 flying at Mach 3.2 or 3.3, whatever it was doing. 3.2, I think, was the standard operating speed. They could go to 3.3 if they needed to. The MiG-25 wasn't quite as fast as that, unless it wanted to sort of burn out its motors and not use them again. So I think it was 2.8, 2.9, something like that. That's the figure that I'm aware of.
Usually 2.5. 2.5, and they could use it again.
Okay. So what was how did you intercept that? How do you deal with a high fast flyer? Why was intercepting a Blackbird so difficult? That's a huge question. I know. Maybe you want to get the drink now, but
no, it's a very good question. It's a valid question. First of all, the parameters for the SR-71 versus the Foxbat. The SR-71, 80,000 feet plus a little bit, 3.0 Mach, 3.3. Okay. Foxbat, 70,000 feet, 2 miles closer to the Earth's surface, and 2.5. A little slower, but when you're doing more than 1.5, that's really not worth arguing about, right? But anyway, a little slower, a little lower. The Foxbat was within the F-15 AIM-7 engagement envelope. The SR-71 was never in it.
Right. The
AIM-7 could never reach 80,000 feet with enough energy left to explode and even damage an SR-71.
Right.
What we did was, in anything that you read about between F-15s and SR-71s, it was training for both sides. The F-15 was the closest thing we, the Americans, had to a Foxbat interceptor, or even a Foxhound. So the SR-71s would like to go against us to practice their tactics, which are pretty much limited to 5 to 10 degrees of heading change. But it has to be done at the right range, right? Because it only takes a little bit to throw the missile way out, because the air is so thin. Those little fins on the AIM-7, or even the Foxhound's missiles, I can't remember what they're called now, or the Foxbat missiles, those little fins, the air is so thin up there. Well, look at it this way. We're giving astronaut wings to people that ride in Elon Musk's rocket ship, and they get up above 50,000 feet. They get astronaut wings, because they're, quote, no air up there. But anyway, so my point is that we were the best Foxbat or Foxhound simulator for the SRs to practice against, and they were the best Foxbat simulator for us to practice against.
Did you have an upper limit on the speed gate then and the radar? Because this article, I've sprung it on you. I should have sent it to you before, but I literally just thought of the question. This article said that and I want to say it's 1,500 knots. The engineers at Hughes have built into the APG-63 a gate that said if you get a return that's more than 1,500 knots, ignore it. And so therefore the radar wouldn't build a track file for it, because it would be filtering it out, because it was
bogus.
Yeah.
They thought it was bogus, right?
Yeah.
It had to be a bogus return, right?
So is there any truth to that?
I don't know.
No, okay.
I don't know. Okay. I'm not an engineer, and I don't recall any upper limit. And as you'll see, and as you're very well acquainted with, on the VSD displays, the closure rate is on the right of that display. Yeah. And we're going to see it be 1,100 knots or more, right? Yeah. Well, that's against F4s in thick air at or below 18,000 feet. Imagine, making it what, 6 times that altitude. Then just the sheer aerodynamics mean that that an airplane flying at that high and with enough speed to sustain, we're talking Mach 2.5 to 3.3 here, then it's going to be astronomical closure rate. And in fact, because the whole thing about an air-to-air missile is that the missile leaves the launching airplane and goes to an intercept point that the target gets it to. If the target turns, then now that intercept point is off to one side, and the missile may not have the legs, the actual physical aerodynamic range to get to that point in space, and then the motor quits and it dives for the dirt. And that was the secret of the SR-71 tactics, was I just need to turn away a little bit to be able to have these missiles run out of poop, so to speak. And then I can turn back on course once I'm past it. But anyway, I digress. My point is that I don't know of any maximum speed gate, but I know that the effective ranges of the AIM-7 against a high fast flyer were north of, let's say, north of 40 miles, 60 something, 75, just because the air is so thin, the target's so fast, it's approaching the intercept point on its own so fast. And in the A7, we were supposed to be above the Mach to launch. We needed to be about 1.2. The AIM-7 motor would generally add about 0.5 Mach to the launcher speed. So you got a missile going at 1.5 to 1.7. I guess the target is doing 2.5, and the closure rate there, that's got to be north of 4.0, 4.2, something like Mach closure rate. That's enormous, as long as they both stay on the same track to one another, to impact one another. You change the angular relationship of one, and now the other one's got to compensate for that with it, and that spoils the intercept. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It makes perfect sense, and it's making me think of another question, which is going to delay you getting a drink. But quickly then. So the converse perspective on that then is you intercepting a high fast flyer that's maybe threatening a high value asset. So if you're protecting AWACS or whatever, and this guy's high fast flyer and he's 10 degrees off, and you think he's not a factor, and then he turns 10 degrees. Now, I guess is it time critical?
Oh yeah.
How if you're protecting and obviously you're not going to tell us any tactics, but if you're protecting AWACS, how do you make sure that you're not caught unawares, or you are protecting out some other kind of high value?
That's a really
asset?
good question, Steve. That's an excellent question. The first phase of an intercept against a high fast flyer is to get on his extended track, his extended radar track. So on the very first lockup, we're in a regime that's very favorable to the F-15 because the radar has no ground clutter. We're looking up into that bososphere, the ionosphere and above, and so the range is incredible because of the power of the radar. It's incredibly long, and at those ranges, as you well know, it's all Doppler. It's not real range. It's looking for whatever the highest speed target. If it could look high enough, it'd get a satellite, at 18,000 miles per hour around the world. So you're looking up, and the radar is in its element. It's in the purest part of its design element. So it will glob onto a high speed target above you, above the launched airplane. And it'll take a little while to sort out the distance, because now it's got to go into medium PRF to get distance. This is all high PRF for Doppler, right? But once that target appears on your scope, on your VSD, the very first thing the F-15 has to do is figure out what that aspect is. Now we have the advantage of the little vector stick, so we can go, okay, he's pointing to down to my left knee. I got to get over in front of him, and then turn to a line fuselages, aligned flight path vectors pointing directly at it. And back then, all we had was a digit and a letter. You know, 1L meant 10 degrees to the left, 2R meant 20 degrees to the right. In other words, and that's his vector. It's not, that's where he's headed. So if we get a 1L, because GCI will do their best to put us on his program track. And of course, if we know where the high value asset is, then of course we get in between it and the Foxbat. More frequently though than a high fast flyer intercept machine for a high value asset was the photo recon Foxbats. Those are much more frequent. In any event, GCI would put you in the ballpark, and then your first lockup, the first thing you look at in key op is what the target's heading was relative to you pointing directly at it. And if it was 10 degrees to the left, then you got over there as quickly as you could. I mean, you'd pull over and you just break the lock, doesn't matter, because you'll get them again. You'll find them again. So you pull over there, you go a ways, you pull back to point at him, because again, GCI is telling you where he's at. Roll that radar up, grab the contact, and you got to be careful because you're already so high that it's easy to bleed the airspeed off. Well, it's easy to bleed the Mach off with a hard turn. Yeah, they're so thin, blah, 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 blah. You know, now you're below the Mach, and you got to accelerate all over again. So you wanted to make a 1.1 Mach turn of, let's say, 30 to 45 degrees to get over on his anticipated track, and then turn back. And as soon as you point it at him using GCI, roll that radar up, grab him again, and hopefully it's showing us a 0. If it's a 0, you're dead on his nose. Okay, unless he turns, you will have a firing solution. If he turns, you won't. He can avoid you by, as I mentioned for the SR-71, by making a simple 10 to 15 degree turn. For the SR-71, it's 5 to 10. For the Foxbat, if he made a 10 to 15 degree turn, he would spoil the solution. And that's also why we would take a 4-ship, and we would, instead of being the usual mile and a half line abreast, we would be in like 2.5 to 5 mile line abreast. That way, it was like, okay, we're going to make this net really wide. One of us is going to be on his nose, right? That increases the chances of a successful intercept. The more fighters you put up, the better your chances of getting an intercept against somebody like that, whose performance is so great that you have a very small, very marginal capability of intercepting even to begin with. And we would practice this every 6 months in the simulator. There was a high fast flyer profile that the simulator instructor could program in, and you weren't allowed to get out of that container, out of that box, so to speak, until you had shot him down. It didn't matter how many times you had to repeat it, but that was it. You lock him up, evaluate the heading, or really the word's aspect angle. Evaluate the aspect angle, pull, get on it, pull, roll of the radar, correct it if you need another correction, and then you get as many missiles in the air as possible. I mean, you're only getting one pass at this guy, so might as well come home empty.